city clerk study hall is going to be more of an open Q&A. We got a number of questions. They came in when some of you registered. You added a question to your registration, which is great. We love those. And they hit on a few kind of all over the thing, all over the map type of questions. Some of them were pretty consistent in looking for, new clerks looking for resources. So that's where we're going to start. And so we'll get into that here in just a second. But if you do have any questions, I would encourage you all to use the chat for this or the Q&A. I'll try to keep an eye on both things. And so either way will work. Q&A is probably a little bit better because it logs them and kind of keeps them in place versus the chat, which is kind of the running list of comments and questions and so forth. And so either way though works, just fire those in there whenever you have a question that pops up. But I'm going to get started on just reviewing some resources we have for city clerks. For those of you that are newer to your job as a city clerk or finance officer or something related to those positions, we have a bunch of resources available to you all that have been developed over time. A lot of the stuff that I'll show you here in a second, I talked in much more detail about in one of our study halls. I think it was last March. And it's linked here from our city clerk study hall page, the city clerk duties and responsibilities webinar. So I'm just going to hopefully, first of all, everyone can see my screen. Hopefully you can see, which is just the league's website. If I can get a few thumbs up just to make sure that everyone can see that, that would be great. Okay, thank you. And so I'm just going to kind of play around our website to get this started, just to show you where a lot of these things are located online and are available to anyone out there. These are all publicly available. And so one of the things I just mentioned here is that City Clerk Duties and Responsibilities webinar, which again was done last year. And so that is something that will walk through the basics of the city clerk job and the duties and responsibilities that come with it. So again, if you're brand new and you're kind of scratching your head on what am I supposed to be doing every day, you know, plenty of people have been there, so don't freak out. You're in the right place. These study halls are really designed for you primarily, along with veteran clerks and finance officers. So I would check out that recording. Again, that'll kind of give you a good sense from an overview perspective of what the main jobs and duties are for the city clerk position. And next, I'm just going to go through again our website just to give a few of the key things that we do. There's plenty of resources, far too many for me to go through this morning in an hour, because again, we have a lot of other questions I want to address for the group. And so this is just our homepage. If you haven't come to gone to the Iowa League site, it's just www.iowaleague.org. And then one of the great resources we have is located right here on our front page, and that's the City Clerk and Finance Officer Handbook, which is opening to a page within the document, how I have my Adobe settings, but this is what it looks like. This, again, freely available to anyone out there. It's a pretty large document, I'm not gonna lie. I'm trying to remember how many pages it is. It's quite a few. But it covers everything. You know, a lot of duties and responsibilities and much more detail for city clerks and finance officers, but it also adds a lot of other guidance and technical resources related to the job and other just municipal government things that you may encounter in your positions. And so it's a lot. Again, I'm not going to expect anyone out there to read this in a night. This is something that you're going to, have to come to here and there when you have some time, especially when you're kind of stumped on an issue. This manual will cover darn near everything under the sun. A lot of veteran clerks and finance officers, along with league staff, have worked on this. There's been multiple versions of this. Cindy Kendall was a great resource that helped us out with this for many years. Teresa Rothschafer is now in a consultant role with us. She's also been very helpful with this, and a number of others, too many people to thank, that have had a hand in developing this handbook over the years and updating it throughout its time. So again, check this out if you're new. If you haven't seen this yet, I would strongly encourage you to have this bookmarked, have it open pretty much all the time, not printed. I know some folks like to print it out and have it, ready on their desk. That whatever makes sense to you, but this is sort of the Bible for city clerks out there. So it covers a lot of things. Just again, kind of get familiar with it, and then you can click into any one of these things directly if you like. It's really nicely laid out. Our communications team just did a wonderful job with this new version, making it all hyperlinked and much more easier to navigate. And it also the value with the PDF, you can search it, search a term, and you'll find hopefully whatever you're looking for. A couple other things too, I wanted to make sure we address because there were some questions about this specifically. And one of those is a calendar. And there was a bunch of questions about like deadlines, which comes up all the time, especially with newer folks. Like, I really want to see when are all the different things due that we're supposed to do. Every city government has to turn in various things throughout the year. And so first of all, we just have a kind of a basic online calendar for everybody out there. And that's great. And then for city clerks, this is going to be an area to get another area of our website to get very familiar with. Under resources, if you go to administration, take a second here. And then we have a section up here, you can hyperlink to city clerk resources, okay? So these pages, and there's a bunch on this whole, again, throughout all of our resources, go back up here to resources real quick here in a second, but there's a bunch of stuff. But this particular sub area is meant for city clerks, obviously. And so there's a bunch in here. I'm going to go to the city clerk resources area because this is one where we include a number of things, but the one I'm wanting to show you in particular is the city calendar. Okay. This is a really nice tool that we've developed over the years. For many years, it was called the city clerk calendar, and it was kind of a PDF handout that we would use. And so we still have the PDF version of this, and I'll just open that up real quick here so you can see it. Another PDF thing, you can search through it, you can print it, you can bookmark it, and it just kind of walks through the year, of course. Now within that, and let me zoom in a little bit so it's probably easier to see for you all. You can see some of the actual deadlines. Okay, so this is the first part of the year. We're in March right now, and hopefully you're all aware of one of the most important upcoming deadlines of getting the budget done, which is actually April 30th now. It used to be in March, but now it's April 30. And so that's a really, really important deadline coming up here. But there's a bunch of other things that we include in here, of course. Going back here recently was W-2s and 1099s. There's all kinds of stuff with audits and financial exams. But you scroll throughout the year, we also insert some important conferences, whether it be league stuff or folks that we work with, like IMFOA, IMWCA, endorsed program of the league, national conferences of interest to certain members like city clerks, city managers, some conferences with their professional associations. When we have those dates ahead of time, we can get those into our calendar for the next year. And so this is a nice kind of overview one again that gives you a yearly calendar looking at the different deadlines. A lot of folks use this to print it out, have it available, or have it on their wall at City Hall, and just so they can kind of follow along. Then I'm going to go back to that same page we were just at where I downloaded this from or opened this from. It's another really nice tool that our communications team recently put together that I think is pretty powerful and simple. And that is just a calendar that you can download. You can just plop this into your own calendar. So Google, of course, and iCal is for Microsoft users. And so you can kind of download that and put that into your Outlook calendar if you like. And so that's a nice, easy way to just plug these in. And so they show up on your calendar within your internet or computer system, whatever you're using. So again, that's another one that we get a lot of questions throughout the year from various people, but particularly the newer folks to the city clerk profession, just kind of trying to get a sense of like when are different things due. These are some really nice tools for you. Another area that we get a lot of questions on from newer folks is like, when can I get training? Which is great. You should get training. And as I mentioned before, the league does offer a number of things throughout the year. And so I'm just hovering over this tab of our main page, our home page. Actually, here's our home page. Go back to that real quick. I was in the resources section. So workshops and events here. And this kind of gives of those things that the league hosts each year. And there's different things that are definitely of more interest to city clerks. Certainly the budget workshops, City Finance 101 just got restarted. That was a series that Cindy Kendall used to host, and now Teresa Roach Schaefer has picked up. We just had our first one of the year in Solon here just like a week or two ago. And that went really well. We're going to do one per quarter with Teresa. And so we can click on that and while we're at it and show you the schedule for the remainder of the year, just for that particular series. So there's a few more of those to go. Those are really great. Again, if you're new to your job and city fund accounting is very difficult to understand, well, that's what these sessions are meant for. Teresa will walk people through what it means to do city fund accounting, all the requirements from the state code and so forth. So that's a great opportunity to learn more about that. The budget workshops are done in November each year and really help cities get started on their annual budget process. Our annual conference is in September of each year, and that's our big statewide conference that has elected officials and appointed staff. This year, we're going to be in Des Moines in mid-September. So that's always a popular event. And then there's some others over here too that, again, I don't have time to talk about each one of these. Then there are some others too to be aware of that we help promote that are good for our members to attend. Of course, I mentioned before, like IMFOA, the Iowa Municipal Finance Officers Association. While I'm at it, I'm just going to pull this up real quick. IMFOA.com is their wonderful new website. Very excited to see this new website. It's a lot cleaner, easier to navigate than their previous one. And so if you're brand new to this position, if you haven't heard of IMFOA, this is the professional association that includes a lot of city clerks and finance officers from around the state. It might be a little confusing, the name of that association. In most communities, they don't have a separate city clerk and finance officer because they can't afford to have two separate positions. There might not be a need for having two separate positions. And so for those cities, the city clerk is the finance officer or the treasurer. And so it's really kind of an interchangeable term. But again, IMFOA is the professional association that a lot of city clerks and finance officers belong to from all around the state, big cities, small towns, you name it. And they do a lot of great training and support for their members throughout the year. They have two conferences per year. There's one coming up in April here in Des Moines. And so you can check that out. So again, if you're brand new to this, I would strongly encourage you to look at membership at IMFOA, as well as take advantage of their training opportunities with this about a month out, their spring conference. There is also a fall conference each year in Des Moines as well. I forget the dates on that one off the top of my head. Actually, our calendar probably has them. Here we go. This is why we do the calendar. Here we go, October 15th through 17th. So even myself, I have to use these tools to remind myself what's going on out there. So again, if you're new to all this, just check this out, get familiar. There's a lot of wonderful people on their board and committees that love to support their colleagues in the profession. And so here is their board, their current board members. These are just really great resources for IMFOA for sure, but also just general questions and whenever you're seeking assistance, they are great to reach out to, and they can either help you or get you directed to the right person for help. One other thing I definitely want to talk about if you're brand new to this and seeking out training opportunities, I am just going to search for a thing that Iowa State University Extension hosts each year. There's what is called the Municipal Professionals Institute and Academy. The Institute is primarily designed for those that are newer to the city clerk and finance officer professions, while the Academy is more for veterans. And there's, the little bit, you can certainly ask Sarah and Antoinette at ISU Extension to get a little guidance on when am I done being a newbie and then when am I ready to go to the academy as a veteran. It's sometimes the line is a little bit blurred based on somebody's past training and certification with IMFOA and so forth. If you're brand new, don't worry about all that stuff. We'll help you out. Just be aware that these conferences are available to you. And they're kind of done in a sort of college course credit method where you can sign up for the entire conference. You can sign up for specific classes you need, especially for those that are trying to achieve certification through IMFOA, which I'll bounce back to here in a second. And so just again, just be aware right now. I'm probably throwing too much at you if you're really new to this job, but just be aware of that these opportunities are out there as well. The next round of the Municipal Professional Institute will be in June. These are held in Ames at the Gateway Center each year. But then they also have some virtual classes, as you can see here, in February and October of each year. And so just check that stuff out, ask questions, and you heard me just a second ago mention IMFOA certification. So this is another one that drives some questions for those that are looking at getting a professional certification through IMFOA. There are also some city governments with their job descriptions or policies that say the city clerk must become certified or must be certified upon employment or must achieve certification within 3 years or something like that. And so if you're in one of those situations, you're wondering what is this credit? What are people talking about? Go to IMFOA and they have a section on this that will help give you details on what is certification, how do I achieve it, how do I maintain it, because there's some CLE stuff you have to do, some continuing ed. And so it's just a great system to help ensure that the clerks and finance officers around the state are trained, educated, and are providing really quality service to their community. Okay, that was a very long intro on just getting started if you're new to this whole deal, but I hope that does help the folks that asked those questions for this webinar. That we had a number of those that came in that were basically related to, I don't know how to get started. I don't know where to find resources. Where do I turn? Where do I get training? Again, it's just trying to give you a few ideas. But all that being said, like I said at the beginning of this, if you have any questions, please drop those into the chat or drop those into the Q&A function, and we can get all of your questions answered. Again, as I said before, we had a number of questions come in. I'm going to reset my homepage there. So I'm just going to dive into these as we go and try to get to as many as we possibly can. Looks like we got about 40 minutes left, and I know you all have lots of questions, so I'm going to try to be efficient, but also be thorough. So let's see here. Can you go over documents that need recorded and the recording procedures requirements? So this is another kind of timeless question, and this came in, I think, from Justina in Fort Madison, if memory serves. Yes, thank you, Justina. And here's another resource I'm going to throw your way from our website. Oops, I clicked on the wrong thing here. So another area of our website, which I would always encourage you to be familiar with, is our publications area. And if you click on that, it should load up the various special reports that we have that cover even more stuff beyond the clerk and finance officer's handbook. And one of those is called our record retention manual, which is right here. So that is a resource, again, that's been developed by quite a few people, city attorneys, league staff, city clerks, finance officers, city managers, and so a lot of folks that have to manage records at the local level have had a part in developing this manual over the years. And a lot of the guidance in this, if you're a veteran on the call today, you're probably familiar with this, and you probably know that most of these records and the retention periods that we recommend have not changed much at all. Since I've been at the league since 2008, a lot of these things are pretty standard. That being said, we're gonna have to. We were able to get away with doing an update to this manual about once every 8 to 10 years because things just really don't change much in the record retention world. However, this is a note just for future planning that we'll probably have to speed that clock up because of the explosion of social media records, or just electronic records, I should say, not just social media, but all kinds of electronic records that really sort of changed record management for cities. So that's a whole side conversation. I don't want to get sidetracked with you all. But just again, if you're kind of new to this and record retention is your duty. There's in the state code an assignment called the lawful custodian of records, which for most city governments is the city clerk. So whether you like it or not, you're going to be in charge of this, at least from a managerial perspective. You can certainly get help from other staff to manage the city's records. And that would include the old paper records and that your city may have, but also again with electronic records, which a lot of cities have moved to in recent years. And so this just gives you again like an overview of how to manage records, electronic records, so on and so forth. And then it gets into all these different schedules. So we identify specific records that a lot of cities have. These are the most common records that our team of folks that help develop this manual have identified, and gives you a retention period and the rationale behind that. The vast majority of records do not have a statutory requirement to be kept a certain amount of time, whether that's from the federal code or the state code. There are some, and so there's really important things like all of your minutes, all of your resolutions and ordinances, those must be kept permanently because there's a state code that says that that's what you must do. So there are a few of those examples out there where property records, I think that's pretty common sense, but there are some state codes that say you must keep pretty much every type of property record permanently. But then there's a whole bunch that do not have that. And so then it's more of a matter of local choice. And so 5 years is kind of the default retention period on things that do not have a statutory requirement. But there might be some longer ones where, with financial type stuff or general obligation bond type stuff that have a longer shelf life of 10 years or even 30 years in some cases. And so that's where this manual can be very helpful to just kind of help you as a city official, lawful custodian, whatever you are, understand like this is the recommended period. Now, this also includes electronic records. So I mentioned before, a lot of cities are going over to electronic records management and systems, put them on servers for some years, but now a lot of cities have gone to the cloud. And so whatever system you have for that, the electronic record can count as your official permanent record if that's what the city wishes. And many cities have done that for various reasons. And so as long as you've got that stored in a place that's safe and accessible, then you're good to go. And then there's also software out there where you can set a period to say, I want to keep this set of documents, whatever they are, for 5 years. And then the software just purges them once they hit that 5 year shot clock. And so it's a nice way to kind of make sure that you're getting rid of stuff you don't need to keep anymore, keeping the stuff you need to keep for whatever time frame you set, and also can kind of help organize things in a more sophisticated manner than the old filing cabinet type of system that a lot of cities had used forever, and still some do, of course. But again, a lot of folks are trying to use the electronic system as much as they can. It's a lot. I'm not gonna lie, it's a lot, but it can be quite useful. I think, let's see. We do have questions related to this I want to address before I move on to something else. Has the league thought about making the record retention policy searchable on the website since it is so vast? Well, Ginger, I mean, first of all, this is a PDF, so it is searchable. So I can search for, let's do obligation and see what pulls up on general obligation bonds. It's gonna get too many hits here. Let's just do ledger. Whoops, there we go. So you can get in there and find stuff like that. That's probably the most basic way of just doing a search within the document since it's a PDF. So that is the value with making this a PDF online document versus we used to, print these out and they would be a printed version, and, the guidance was great, but it wasn't searchable. So that's the simplest way of getting a search done within this manual. I'll have to think about maybe a more advanced way of making this searchable. But it's a good thought. And Ginger, it looks like you also had a question on CMC designation and getting credits. That's going to have to be referred to IMFOA. So this is one thing just for you all to understand how this really works. IMFOA is a separate association. It's a professional association. So they are separate from the League of Cities. We do have a contract in place with them to provide administrative support, helping just kind of provide housing their funds and just sort of giving them administrative support with all their membership issues and actions. They're one of the more self-sufficient professional associations that we partner with at the league. But we do lend a hand on various things with whenever things come up. So the one thing though that is unique to IMFOA compared to perhaps like the City Manager Association, City Attorney Association, is that the certification is done within IMFOA's association. And so there are a lot of questions that come with that. They did do a big conversion with their credit tracking system. I forget the actual name of it, but um, it it did get converted to their new website. And so again, this is, if you're new to this, I'm probably losing you, but just be aware again, if there's certification questions and all that, so go to their website and definitely talk to their board. They also have, whoops, their committees, because they have a committee that is specifically set aside for certification right here. Okay. And so we often have to defer questions to those folks, if especially, diving into how to get enough credits when, what is the sort of the benchmark for achieving certification or maintaining certification. The league staff, we're aware of this stuff. We can certainly help on sort of the more basic questions, but once it gets to a higher level, we have to defer to the folks at IMFOA. Okay. Okay, let me get back to my questions here real quick. And we have plenty more to go. Another one from Justina, which is I'm glad you asked this one because this is one that comes up almost every week. That's probably exaggerating. At least once a month. It's probably more like 2 or 3 times a month about council vacancies. And this has increased in the last several years for various reasons. But a lot of cities experience a council member that resigns their position on the council or mayor midterm, before their term has expired, and that creates a vacancy. And so there's questions that come from that, what do we do? So I can share, like I have kind of a boilerplate answer for this when we get questions, because we get it from clerks, we get it from city managers, we get it from elected officials themselves. And so we do have a lot of just kind of standard guidance on this, and I'll quickly walk you through it without hopefully losing anybody. The first thing I'll say is section 372.13, subsection 1, or 2, I should say, sets the process to fill a vacancy on your council or in your mayor's position. And there's really 2 choices to get started. The council has a choice to either fill that vacancy by special election. And in that scenario, they just need to talk to the county auditor to schedule a special election at the soonest possible time, and off you go. Then it's just like any other election. Anyone who is eligible for office can get nominated, put their name on the ballot, and the election will obviously get whoever wins will be the person who fills that vacancy. Now, that is one option. The other option is to fill it by appointment, which is much more common because the appointment process is far quicker and far cheaper. If you do a special election, obviously the city's gonna have to bear the cost of holding that election. The county will just assess you the fee for doing the election work, and your city has to pay for it. With the appointment process, it's far cheaper because the only thing statutorily that you must do as a city is publish a notice. For cities over 200 population. You have to publish all of your notices. For cities less than 200, you have to post your notices at 3 public places around the community. And so the only cost you really have as a city under the appointment process is that notice. And that notice must be published or posted at least 4, but no more than 20 days prior to the council meeting where the appointment will be made. Okay, so it's very simple. And the appointment consideration for the council in terms of who they can appoint, it just needs to be anyone who's eligible to serve on the city council. So it has to be a resident of the city, and they must be able to vote. And able to vote does not necessarily mean that that are registered to vote. It just means that they're able to vote. They have their voting rights. And so the resident of the city, they're able to vote. They can be appointed to the council or for a vacant mayor position again. Now, those are the 2 processes the state code allows for the council to get this vacancy filled. If this council chooses, or actually at any point, the citizens of the community can petition for a special election. So specifically, if the council chooses to fill it by appointment, then the state code says the citizens of the community have 14 days after that appointment is made to petition for a special election, which is rare to see, but it can happen. If somebody, a group of citizens, I should say, doesn't like the council's choice, they have the right to petition for a special election, and the petition threshold, somebody correct me if I'm wrong on this, I believe it's 15% of the number of people who voted in your last regular city election. So, and no less than 10 for the very small towns out there. That, 15% might not represent more than not many people. It still has to be at least 10. So it's a very low threshold to get that done, but it's pretty rare to see that happen. Usually councils can fill their vacancies via appointment and you're good to go. The other thing here to keep in mind, if you do encounter this and the council wants to fill it by appointment, do not sit on it because you only have 60 days under state code. You only have 60 days to fill a vacancy by appointment. If you cannot get that done within 60 days, your only other recourse then is to call a special election. So don't wait around. If you do have a vacancy that you need to fill, make sure that and the council wants to fill it by appointment, make sure you get moving. So if you have any questions on that though, just again, use the chat or the Q&A and we'll get those answered. Let's see here. Trying to find my list again. Okay. Oh, actually, I am so sorry. I meant to also give an update on GWorks. And there was a couple of questions about GWorks, so this is a good reminder for me to get to that little note on my list here. And actually, I missed one other thing I need to get to too. And so on GWorks, let's talk about that here for a second. So there's a lot of questions. We got several questions related to accounting. And so first of all, if you're how do I get there? If you're new to this whole game, first of all, you are required by the state code of Iowa to account for all of your revenues, all of your expenditures. Obviously, that's your normal general fund type stuff with any city has, but it includes things like that may be, kind of considered separate. Like some cities give their fire departments a whole lot of leeway to manage their budget. Same with the library. Library board, for a lot of cities that have a library, the library board is basically allocated a general fund amount from the city's budget, and then the library board takes it from there and they manage the library's services, schedules, programs, and the budget. And so it's kind of separate in a way, but technically speaking, all of those funds, all of those financial transactions are city government transactions. They must be accounted for. That is statutorily required by the state code of Iowa. You have no choice. You must do this. From there, I mentioned before, in the accounting system, there's a whole sort of complex system to this, and you're not required to, but a lot of cities use the chart of accounts, the uniform chart of accounts. And so the reason I'm bringing all of this up is GWorks, one of the software solutions they offer is meant to help you do your accounting. They do other things too, with payroll and accounts payable, utility billing, things like that. And so it kind of depends on each city and what they use GWorks for. But that's one of the things they do is accounting. And so this would also be true of the other big providers that I've heard, and some other can use it, chime in if you like. Banyan, Tyler, Edmonds. I know there's some others out there that cities use. GWorks is one of the bigger ones. For more popular ones, I don't know how many cities in Iowa. There's 939 cities in Iowa. I'd be willing to bet they're close to half, or maybe a third to half, somewhere in there, that use GWorks, especially for their financial accounting software. I also need to share that the GWorks is in our Community Alliance Partner Program. So there's 22 firms in that program that do various things for cities, service providers that do different things for cities, whether that be legal work, financial accounting, a lot of engineers in there, some folks like that. So those are companies and firms that our board, League's executive board, has vetted along with the league staff that do good work. They've got a good reputation, and we can kind of recommend them as good service providers if you're looking for this or that service. Now with GWorks, there have been a lot of issues stemming back to, I think, last fall, somewhere in there, due to a couple of things that were pretty significant. There's a big price increase for existing clients. And then there's also a cloud conversion where they're moving everybody from an old antiquated system to a newer system. that's modern and better, but obviously change is hard, especially when you're talking about software, and especially for city governments where you have a lot of turnover in the clerk position and other positions as well. And so it has been a lot. And there's been a lot of issues with the other thing that's been top of my mind is customer service. It's been a lag that they've acknowledged, and in terms of somebody submits a ticket for assistance with this, that, or the other thing, or has a glitch in the software that they need to get straightened out, and the response times have not been adequate. Um, so a quick update that I wanted to share with you all, and that the myself and Katie Wheeler, who is our communications manager or director, she also manages the Community Alliance Partner Program I just described. We met with GWorks last week to get your concerns addressed because we've heard from a lot of members that are clients of GWorks that they're having all these frustrations and issues. And since they are a partner program, we have a duty to work with them to either improve things or see if the contract, the partnership, I should say, is still valuable. And so that was an open and honest conversation. I think we came away feeling like improvements are being made, are going to continue to be made. They are committed to this very strongly. They shared that the Iowa group within their company is definitely their most robust, and so they're well aware of the issues and they want to make improvements. They're a company, and so they know what this means. They've got a bottom line to meet, like any other company has. And so I think they are well aware that they need to step up. And so we'll see. We told them we appreciate what they told us and that they're making investments in their customer service staff and improving their response times, uh, trying to be more cognizant of that. And they have also committed to doing more like I forget what they call them, like client roundtables or kind of sessions to help users do some training and kind of get better at using the system. And then with the cloud conversion, they are moving everybody over to that. I think they're giving everybody in their client base a window of time, one more year, I think, on the agreements before they got to get converted. And I know that creates heartburn. The one thing I would say, not necessarily to defend everything out there, but within the software universe, I think all of us are pretty familiar that a lot of these companies, whatever service they provide, are moving to more cloud-based systems. Whether you like it or not, this is where all these folks are going. And there's pretty obvious reasons for that. It's cheaper and more efficient for companies that are in the software space to do that. Um, Now the upside to it, as they described, is that it will make their customer service more efficient. Because one of the issues with the old Simple City system is it's built on very old code that is I think they said it's more than 20 years old. And there's not many software engineers around that know that code and know how to use it, know how to work it, know how to make changes and improve it. And that's been part of their issue internally as a company. And so that there is an upside to it. And I think they understand it. It's change is hard for folks and it's never smooth and easy for, again, whether it's financial software, whether it's something else. But they are trying, and so we're gonna give them some time here to make these improvements, and then we're gonna come back to the membership and do some more polling or just communicating to see where things stand in terms of our partnership with GWorks. So hopefully that answers a few of your questions on where things stand. I sincerely hope there are big improvements. And I've already seen some questions on force change. I totally get that. They do as well. Again, I'm not trying to defend any company out there from that standpoint, but I think others have talked about, especially on ClerkNet. That's another quick sidebar for newer folks. If you do join IMFOA, one of the great benefits of that association is ClerkNet, and which is an email forum where you can share questions or ask questions, I should say, share ideas, share resources, a lot of great networking done there. And so that's right over here, ClerkNet. And so there's been a lot of conversations on ClerkNet about this issue at GWorks. And I know though that, to kind of balance out the landscape, I think some others have reported that, I think it might have been Tyler or Ben. I don't want to be misrepresent any companies out there and get in trouble for that. So I apologize if I'm not 100% accurate on this, but I think one of the other major providers is also doing the same thing, where they're forcing all of their clients to the or to the cloud as well. And they're obviously having problems in the same respect as GWorks. And again, this is just, you see that here, you see that with web development, you see that with social media. I mean, this is just the way of the world, folks. And so I don't, that, doesn't mean you have to like it, but, we're clients, we all have to suffer together in some respects. So let me get back to some questions here. Sorry, I gotta get caught up. And now I got a question here from Chris Reinhardt, my friend in Atumwa, on the tobacco device retailer permits, which I do not know yet, and I have not yet had time to research this. My apologies. I did want to open it up though to the group. If anybody has had recent experience, because I know, and this is for like, I mean, I know where Chris is going with this because they made a couple changes. First of all, I think it was 2 years ago, with your cigarette licensing or permitting, the state of Iowa switched everything over to this sort of online, talk about online conversions and forcing people to do different things. Here you go. The state of Iowa has done a lot of this in the last few years and all sorts of things. But this is one of them where they switched the cigarette permitting process to everything having to be done online, sort of through a certain thing. And again, I think there's probably some upsides to it to make it more efficient for everybody, but I know there was some heartburn with that. And then related to that, there was a state code, I think it was last year, that adopted like a different sort of permitting process for tobacco device retailers, which is, I'm not a tobacco user, so I don't really know exactly what this means, but I think it's like things like pipes and devices that are used, vapes, I guess. I'm guessing at this, but I think I'm right. Correct me if I'm wrong, anyone out there. And there's a separate permitting that is meant just for those types of retailers, which I would guess that some of them are one and the same, that they're retailing tobacco and they also have tobacco devices. And so they might probably, I'm guessing they would be able to do a permit in the same sort of process. Um, so I have not yet had time to really dive into this, but I'd be happy to reach out to the state of Iowa if there are remaining questions on it. But again, if there's any veterans on here who have kind of navigated this new system and can report out, that would be great. Otherwise, I'll put a pin in it and make sure that we research this and get some good, clear guidance and maybe even do a webinar. Some of you remember we did a webinar with the Alcoholic and Beverages Division, probably 2 or 3 years ago when they made a whole slew of changes to their permitting process, which some of that was done internally, some of that was forced by state code changes to different types of alcohol permits that, again, anytime changes happen, things don't go as smooth as you would hope. And so there was some heartburn over that, but I think it got to a better place on the alcohol permitting side of things, or licensing, I should say. And so I just wanted to acknowledge this question because I know it's an important one for a lot of cities have these types of retailers in town. And so it's a good question for the group. Another question we got, this is from Janetta Long, hopefully I'm saying your name correctly, from City of Yale. When are resolutions needed and how are they used? So this is a timeless question. I'm glad you asked it because it is more confusing than it should be. And I don't know why that's the case, but this is what we have. So here, I'm going to go back to our website here at the Iowa League of Cities, go to our administration or resources area, sorry, then administration. Okay, so resources administration contains a whole bunch of great stuff. And this page on voting requirements and regulations will give you a little backdrop. Also, and I'll go back to this here in a second. But let me finish my thought here. This will give you a nice little overview on what is the difference between a motion, a resolution, and an ordinance. The easiest way to look at this is I would start with ordinances. Ordinances are always the most kind of important thing. That's like legislation. An ordinance is used to adopt code, which is law. That's a city law. So as you can see on our webpage here, we identify things like speed limits. That is a law that you can enforce with a municipal infraction if somebody breaks the law. Parking, that's another one. Same type of deal. That's a law of the city. Also, and it's kind of weird that the state code does this, but water and sewer and other utility rates have to be established by ordinance as well, unless you have a separate utility board. They can use a resolution. I know this is confusing. I apologize for the state code being so confusing and inconsistent sometimes, but that is an ordinance. Now, resolutions are basically policies. And so employment policies, every city out there should have employment policies that govern behavior in the workplace. They govern time off, paid leave, all sorts of things. I think everybody's seen an employee policy handbook or manual, personnel manual, whatever they're called. Those are policies. And so each one of those policies is approved by the city council. Okay, so that's a resolution. Also, things like contracts, the annual budget, wages, those are all essentially policy statements of your city government to say we're going to do X, Y, Z. It's not a code, it's not necessarily permanent like a code is. It's not a law, but it is a policy statement, so it carries a lot of weight. And then finally, motions are just used for procedural type things to move forward through your agenda, doing routine business such as approving building permits, liquor licenses, as we just talked about, minutes from the last meeting, just sort of perfunctory routine business. They don't really carry the weight of a policy or the weight of a law, certainly, but you still need the council to approve them because you gotta kind of just do this routine procedural type business. So that's what you would use motions for. All of this guidance and more is also included in that clerk handbook. So again, I would always have that city clerk handbook open and available to help you out. But hopefully that helps get you the basics on when you use a resolution or when you need to have the council do an ordinance or a motion for that matter. Let's see here. We have several others. I'm trying to kind of group these because some of these come in and they're pretty darn similar. Excuse me. Okay, I have another question here from Michaela in Mobile, and this is about how to set up new accounts for things like savings or GO bonds. Now, this opens up a whole can of worms, which is great. These are the questions why we're doing these study halls, frankly, because we get a lot of questions related to, well, kind of two sides to this. First of all, there's a side of bank accounts. Okay, so there's a lot of guidance to share there, but I will just give you the overview because I know we only got 10 minutes to go anyways. With bank accounts, every city should have a resolution that sets up your actual banking accounts, your checking account, and then kind of depends on each city on how you want to have maybe some reserves in a savings account or CDs, which, we spent probably 10 years where cities were not putting any money in CDs because the interest rates were minuscule. But then here in the last 3 years, the interest rates have gone up and we're kind of seeing interest rates like we used to see of maybe 4% or 5%, something like that. Whatever your local bank is offering, they've gotten quite competitive, which is great. Because if you've got reserves that you want to earn some interest on, shove them into a CD and you can probably get some decent returns over a 5-10 year period, assuming the interest rates stay the way they are at, which probably won't happen, but we'll see. Anyways, your council should definitely in a resolution set up your normal banking accounts. This is our depository. It might be a depository resolution as it's labeled. So it depends on each city. So if you want to check into your archives, you might need to look up depository resolution or bank account resolution, something to that effect. But it should identify where they're located, checking account, savings account, whatever it may be, and then the limits. $1 million, $2 million, whatever it is for each city. something to that effect. And that's just like a checking account like you would use for any business, any individual. Okay. And so that just check on that, make sure you're aware of that. Every city should have one. And then same with like any kind of investments, CDs, um, money markets. You're pretty limited as a city government on what you can invest in, with a big line in the sand being you cannot invest in speculative stocks and other kind of speculative types investments. So it's very safe investments, and there's different types of things. Definitely talk to a financial advisor or banker, whoever can help you with that, to understands what municipal governments in Iowa can invest in. But that should also be adopted by a resolution. You also need an investment policy um, adopted by resolution, which I'm guessing if you have investments some point in time in previous time, your council adopted an investment policy. So you got to follow that as well. So that's kind of on the in banking side of this whole deal. And then talking about new accounts. So this, if the question is more about how do I track different kind of sub accounts, so I want to make sure I can see those savings or see those investments on my ledger, on my accounting system separately than the general fund or the reserves. I totally get that. A lot of cities do that, and you should do that. Especially for general obligation bonds, because those carry a lot of requirements, and they have repayment schedules, debt service payments, and so on, that you got to be very, very good with and very on top of, to make sure that everything's done correctly. Especially when you're doing general obligation bonds, usually there's a whole schedule of payments, and the city signs a contract saying, we're going to do this. We're going to issue these payments at this time each year, blah, 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 blah. Okay. So you got to follow that to a T. So it makes a lot of sense in your internal accounting to make sure I can identify those. I can see the status of them any day I want and show them to the council as well, so they know exactly where things stand on, the repayment schedule for this bond and that bond and so on. So within your accounting system, you have the freedom as a city government to create sub accounts. And so again, I mentioned this before, there's something called the Uniform Chart of Accounts. So just search that. It's on our website. We don't have time today to get to it, but just understand that's out there, and that gives you a numbering system. Okay. And there's all kinds of things in there so that you can follow that as a numbering system. And I'm sure your city already does that within its own accounting. And then within one of those areas, you can add a line with its own 4-digit code that gives a sub account to say, okay, I want to break out this general obligation bond. The other question or the other example I would give is a lot of cities will have a sub fund or sub account for donations. If they're raising money for a new playground or a new or expanding the library, for example, they can break that out within their accounting because it makes sense. I want to be able to see it's separate from the general fund, separate from this reserve fund or this capital improvement fund. I want to see how much donations we've received for that project. And that way you can always show the council, the public, well, we have $11,000 so far. Our goal is $50,000. So we've got some work to do. You can always come back to that. It's really easy for everyone to see. So hopefully that answers the questions about just kind of the accounting for different types of funds, also with the bank accounts and investment accounts as well. The last one I had here is kind of grouping these together as best as I can. There was different account or questions on 1099s and W-2s, which these probably came in before the deadline. So I'll go back to our calendar here. So I apologize. This might be kind of after the fact in terms of this year, because W-2s and 1099s have deadlines that were passed now. I believe, someone correct me if I'm wrong, there used to be deadlines in March, but I think they moved them up to February and January. So again, I'm guessing these questions came in prior to these deadlines. So hopefully everybody's in good shape. But you do have to do these each year. W-2s obviously are for employees. You got to get those out to the employees by January 31st, and then you have to file them electronically with the federal government. And then 1099s are for when you issue pay to contractors and service providers that in excess of $600 per year. And there's little quirks in the law in there, but that's the general rule. is that a 1099 has to get out to those folks that, again, you've issued uh, pay to in excess of $600 in a year. And you have to use the forms prescribed by federal government. IRS, I believe, is in control of these. Someone correct me if I'm wrong on that. And so hopefully that gives you the quick overview on just your W-2 and 1099 requirements as a city government. I know there were some changes made at the state level, I think 2 years ago, and then I think they've continued to tweak their system. Talk about changes. Again, I know changes are hard, and you get the previous system down, and the state decides to change it again. I heard some scuttlebutt about that here recently. So again, I hope everybody's in a good place with those. And then we'll have to see if they make more changes for next year. I would not be surprised. There's been a lot of changes at the state level in various ways. And so we just have to try to keep up as best we can. That gets me through all the pre-law questions. We have 3 minutes for any other questions from the group. Please get those in there quickly into the chat or the Q&A. Looks like I have one over here on the Q&A that I missed. I apologize. Are any of the seminars available via Zoom for those of us who can't drive to bigger cities? Yes. So this is a nice reminder. Thank you from a anonymous attendee. I'm going to go back up to our workshops and events. And so the ones that I would point to that the league controls, and like today, we record these. City Finance 101, we are not recording those. Those are in person. It's just harder, I think, to capture all that guidance in a virtual setting. Although I'll talk to Teresa about potentially doing a virtual one at some point in the year, see if there's value in that. Our budget workshops, yes, we within that series, we do record or have a virtual option that we do record. So yes to that one. Small city workshops, same deal. We do a virtual, those are all virtual, in fact, and we record those. But we do not with our nuisance abatement conference and with our annual conference. And that's because those have concurrent sessions throughout the day. And it's frankly costs too much that we would have to throw that cost onto the attendees to provide it in a digestible manner. And it's just, frankly, it's not worth it. So it's the answer is kind of yes and no on, virtual sessions for all of our trainings and opportunities. Just kind of depends on each series or each conference. And I think the same is true with IMFOA. Their conferences in spring and fall are not virtual. And then if MPI, MPA, as I said before, going back over to that, they have a mixture as well. So the June stuff is all done in person, but then their winter and fall sessions are virtual. So you got a little bit of mix of both. So I think the league and the folks that we work with, everyone's trying to have a little bit of a blend, if you will. Make sure that we have in-person stuff because there's a lot of value of doing these classes in person, but also recognizing that some folks can't travel, they can't afford, or they can't leave City Hall. I know I've heard that a lot of times over the years that, we can't just close City Hall so I can go to class. Okay, so we try to, again, offer a mixture of virtual and in person. All right, we're at time, but if there's any other questions, please let me know. Obviously throughout the year, I hear from a lot of you, which is great. Never hesitate to ask myself or anyone here at the league any questions. I'll double down on the guidance from, your colleagues at IMFOA that they're willing to help, they want to help. And one last thing that I can't believe I forgot to add or mention when I was covering, this is our publications. Let me get back over to our resources as we close out here. The Clerk Mentor Program. And that's another just excellent resource for cities out there. We have a number of wonderful, wonderful mentors who have volunteered. They're veterans who know this stuff really, really well. And they have volunteered to provide assistance to their colleagues from around the state. At the same time, we have lost a few mentors due to retirement. We haven't lost them. They're still around, but they have retired. And we would love to get some more volunteers to fill those vacancies, if you will. Also, as you can see here on our map, we have several areas of the state that are underrepresented from a mentor perspective. So we would love, love, love to get some more volunteers to help out with this. It is additional work, I get it. But if you are a veteran and you're willing to step up and help, or if you know someone in your region that we could lean on to become a mentor, please let me know. We really need to drive this to get a few more folks to help cover the state of Iowa. Now, one more question, then we'll close things out. How long can a mayor pro tem fill in for the mayor? Well, that's a great question, and the state code does not put a shot clock on this whatsoever. Now, keep in mind though, if you have a vacancy, you have 60 days to fill that by appointment, and if you don't fill it by 60 days, you have to call, your city does, you have to call for a special election, okay? So that's on the vacancy side of that, but that could be related to a mayor's position where the mayor pro tem is filling in for a mayor who is absent or the seat is vacant. So there is a shot clock from that perspective. But if the mayor, let's say the mayor is ill and is on like, bed rest for a very long period of time, they can't come to council meetings and they can't do their normal, work coming into city hall, signing checks and stuff like that. Okay, what do we do? The state code is silent. So this is really each city council's call to make on like how long do we allow a person to kind of be on hiatus? If again, I don't know what you call it, but say they're on hiatus. And so it's up to you. I've seen cities be more patient than others, but eventually, it can't go on forever. And so if it's been several months and you're kind of waiting for this person to return to their normal duties, you're probably going to be very polite, but also say, hey, what's the deal here? Are you able to return within the next month? We owe it to the citizens of our community to have an active member in each elective office, whether that's mayor, whether that's council. So I would say that it's case by case, if somebody's on bed rest, but they're going to be back, once their broken leg heals, okay, we can wait for that. But if it's a long-term illness, you might have to have a very soft, sensitive conversation saying, we owe it to the citizens that, if you can't get back within the next 60 days, we would ask you to voluntarily resign your seat so somebody else can serve. Yeah, so Ginger, hopefully I answered that question there in terms of like what I would tell a council. That's what I would tell a council. Like, it's up to you guys as elected officials, but the mayor is elected too. And so whether it's the mayor seat, whether it's a council seat where somebody's absent and not able to serve due to, again, like illness, injury, whatever, you're gonna have to work through that case by case. But to me, it can't go on for, forever. You've got to put an end to it at some point because the citizens are owed representation, active representation on their council in each seat, whatever the case may be. So I know it's not a very definitive answer because the state code is not definitive here, but I would try to work through that as best you can. Okay. A lot of great questions as always. I hope this was valuable to you all. We do these once per quarter, trying to help the city clerk profession and finance officer profession, especially for you, those of you that are newer. Our next webinar is in our study hall, I should say. Let's see here, is June 18th. And so we'll get registration open for that pretty soon here. And we'll again take questions and when you register, you can submit your questions then. And I'm sure we'll get a lot of great ones as well. In the meantime, though, always ask your questions of the league. Check out all the various resources we talked about today. And I want to close out by saying I appreciate all of your service. We know, especially if you're new to this, that there's a lot to learn. I always make this remark, whether I'm talking to new council members, new clerks, there is way more in the city clerk position, finance officer position than most people realize. And it is an invaluable service to your community. And so I know it's a very stressful thing to do at times, and I know it's a lot to learn. But what you're doing is incredibly important to your community. So stick with it. You have a lot of friends out there among the clerk world, among the here at the league as well. We want to help you. We want to support you. That's why we exist. And so don't feel like you're on an island. I know that's the case sometimes, but you do have people who want to help you and want to support you. And I'm one of them. So keep up your great work. I know it's budget season, so get back to your budgets and good luck in that, finishing all that work up. I appreciate you being on today. We'll talk to you soon. Thank you.